It's my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Mr. Bill Sanderson, who is Executive Director of 21st Century Learning in San Francisco Unified School District. Ms. Ericka Lovrin, Principal of Washington High School here in San Francisco. Mr. Yo Azama, Japanese language teacher and National Teacher of the Year, woohoo, from North Salinas High School. And Dr. Midori McKeon, Professor and coordinator of the Japanese program at San Francisco State University. So we're so fortunate to have this continuum, or the stream of wonderful people to represent, from the school district to the school site to the individual classroom, and then the connection to the university. In this panel discussion, we will be exploring the importance and benefits of learning Japanese to prepare our students for the 21st century. We'll examine the current status of Japanese language in the Bay Area, both successes and challenges. And the goal of this panel is to demonstrate this connection, the streamline between K through 12 and higher education and partnerships with the community, so that we can expand and join forces together to promote Japanese language education. In reality, we all know this, we are facing extremely diminishing resources. And we have to be very creative and resourceful to sustain and expand our language programs. The loss of federal funding, cuts from the state and national budgets, these are realities that we're facing, and they will continue to cause tremendous hardships for each of us and for our students. One example, if I can give you just one example that's related to Japanese in San Francisco of this severe cut that we're facing, is we have this language pathway that I was talking to you about when I did the welcome. We're planning the pathway for our elementary school students to be able to take Japanese in middle school. Well, we're short funds. The principals got their budgets this last Saturday, right? And Ericka, you were cut $1.1 million out of her budget. All the schools are drastically reduced in their budgets. So we actually can't afford the $18,000 that we need to fund a zero-period Japanese teacher to do the middle school program. So we're scratching our heads thinking, okay, what can we do? We don't have money in our budget, but we have to have this language pathway. It's so important to us. So we're seeking collaborations, support of family, community, local partners to help us fundraise and try to be able to raise the money that we need to hire the teacher so that we can have this continuous pathway. This is just one example of many, many hardships that we're having with the financial crisis. So we're hoping that even though we have this economic hard times, we've received an amazing gift from Japan Society, a donation, Adopt the School program. So these kinds of partnerships are the types of things that are sustaining us and helping us continue what's of utmost importance, and it's the language education for our children and our students. So let's hear from our panelists, starting with Mr. Sanderson. Can you tell us what are the important things about multilingual and multicultural study for students in the 21st century?
First of all, from the perspective of the school district, is this working okay? Okay, from the perspective of the school district, I think that we need to articulate, one, what is the vision, but then two, what is the reality? And I think that they are two separate things, that we as a school district have a very strong vision that really is founded in the principle of access and equity and for student success. And we want to build a very strong core curriculum for students and give them a core curriculum that will help them be successful in the 21st century. So I believe that clearly is what the vision of the school board, what the vision of the school district is. Many of you know that we have done a number of things in the school district to really express that and put it into motion. One is the importance of language pathways that Margaret referred to earlier that we do have in the school district, specifically the language pathway that we have in Japanese that is relevant to most of the folks here. In addition to that, over the past few years, you know that we have changed our high school graduation requirement to include a second year of a world language. So it has really a two-sided impact. What that does is it requires a second year of world language of everyone, beginning with the class of 2014, but at the same time, it may decrease because of the fiscal situation that we're in, the number of higher level world language classes that we possibly could offer. So I believe that we do have a very clear, articulated vision around student success in San Francisco Unified. I believe, with that said, that multicultural and multilingual education is extremely important for students. It is something that is absolutely necessary for students to become successful in the 21st century.
Thanks, Bill. What's the current condition of Japanese language education here in San Francisco?
Currently, Japanese language, we offer 2 programs in elementary schools, 2 programs in middle schools, and 3 programs in high schools. And again, we have vision, we have reality, and this really is where the reality kicks in. And I know that that is a decrease from what we had maybe 8 years ago in San Francisco Unified. What I do believe, though, and I really, I am very hopeful, because one, I believe that if a community values and can articulate that value of a program to the broader community, then it will help programs grow. For example, and this is really what I mean by that, everyone here is obviously passionate about Japanese language and culture. You all are. My challenge to you is to go out and multiply that ×2 in San Francisco. When you start doing that, when we start doing that, and I am a part of that we, when we start doing that and communicating that value, I believe that we will see nothing but programs growing again. I do have hope in the fiscal situation that we are in, and I do believe that it is something that is highly valued by the citizens of San Francisco, and think that we will be able to move forward with that.
That's wonderful. I feel like you kind of addressed my next question.
I
think you did. I was going to ask you, in these hard economic times, what is it that school districts or any of us can possibly do to sustain and support? Is there anything you would like to add?
I just want to say this, and I spoke briefly with Yo in between. It was one of the last questions. And I think that it's critical for us to communicate the value of Japanese language and culture to our greater community. I really believe that Japanese is a critical language in a global economy, and that we must prepare students to be able not only to work, but to survive and to lead us in that global economy. I don't like to admit that I'm 40-some years old now. I'm not a teenager anymore. At some point in time, we are going to look to the students that I taught, that you taught, to be our leaders. And what kind of values do we want to instill in them? And I believe it is critical, absolutely critical, in the society that we are in, that we show them the importance of the Japanese language and culture.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate your candor and your hopefulness. We need hopefulness in these times. And Ms. Lovrin, if you can talk about, maybe you went to Japan, didn't you, on the Japan Foundation tour? Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I'm very fortunate. Is this working? I was very fortunate that I went to Japan approximately 2.5 years ago. Sensei Morikawa came running down the hall after me one day as I was running through the school, and he says, "What are you doing in June?" And I said, "Well, I'm having a grandson." And he says, "How would you like to go to Japan?" So I came home to my husband and said, "I'm going away for 10 days. So I was very lucky to go with a wonderful group of educators to Japan, and very fortunate that the Japan Foundation sponsored this trip. And some of the things that I was most impressed with is the community that the teachers have with their students. Not only do they eat with their students, but they clean the rooms with their students. And I so wish, as I pick up many pieces of trash throughout my school, that this was a value that our teachers here had. I know that the union probably would not agree with that, but it is something that it shares the community feeling of the students and the teacher. The cultural activities that I was able to see and was impressed upon me prior to leaving for Japan. We all met in Los Angeles, and I really found out about the Japanese language, and I have to beg to differ a little bit here, because they told us that Japanese was one of the easiest languages to learn. So maybe it was because we were getting on a plane for 10 days and we were scared to death, but I've just heard that the characters are very hard. So, and I can say my Japanese is un poquito, very small. I'm trilingual. But I can say that they impressed upon us that Japanese is really, and I shared this with Azama sensei earlier, that that Japanese is really taught in Japan, is spoken in Japan, and it's unlike Spanish or French or English that other countries use it. And so we really have to be proactive in getting the Japanese language into other cultures. And so that is something that I've shared with the teachers at Washington High School. We have a very, very good program. And you know, the other things that I learned is that sharing ideas with other educators was really good across the time that we were there. And of course, the cultural, the beauty of Japan was just, it was just gorgeous, you know, being on the bullet train. And we worked very, very hard, I have to say. We were there 6 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and we did have a little weekend to go away.
Thank you so much. Lovrin sensei, Kocho sensei, 少し.
Oh, 少し.
Un poquito, 少し. よくできました. I'm still a Japanese teacher at heart.
Okay. Gozaimasu is my. There was a man from Ohio that said,
Ohio
gozaimasu.
That's close. Close. Wonderful. So you have a very long history of a strong Japanese program at Washington. What are some of the strengths of your program? I think he's sitting in the room, maybe, and the products of that strength are also sitting in the room. And how does the study of Japanese benefit your students?
I would say the strength of our program is in the teaching. Morikawa sensei, who's at the back of the room there, is one of the best teachers in the school. When I have tours, I take them right up to see his room. And why is it a fabulous room? Because he's engaging, because the teachers in the Japanese language engage the students in some of the best teaching strategies that we have in the building. And I would say that that goes across all of our world languages, because the world language department works very closely together. It's not something that you just lecture to. You have to make sure, as was mentioned before, that there's games and there's activities going on in the classroom. So the students really enjoy going into the Japanese language classes. The technology, what happens is they're in the middle of a conversation, and all of a sudden Morikawa sensei comes up with technology and shows the actual example of what's going on in Japan, and the students are fascinated by it. And also there's a community within that classroom. We have Tim Lee, who is our student body president, who will talk later about Japanese and learning, but it's across all of the students that are in the program like to be involved in some of the cultural activities that they do after school with the Japanese community and with the Japanese Honor Society. And they really, really enjoy being involved in the program. Even on the days when they're coming in for AP cram sessions, they are there with food and with culture and learning, and they like to be there even though it may be difficult.
Thank you so much, and that's the perfect segue. The success of a Japanese program occurs in the classroom. It starts in the classroom. So let's move over to Azama Sensei with the classroom perspective. And would you like to tell us what it feels like to be National Teacher of the Year as the first Japanese teacher and what that means in terms of Japanese language education?
Feels great.
Awesome.
No, it was interesting experience I never felt before. I did feel a little bit of pressure, or when I met with Japanese teachers. Oh, by the way, who was someone there? Denver when that happened? Okay, great, just 2 people. Okay, all right. But when that happened, as you can remember, a lot of people start kind of claiming me, or in a good way, like California teachers. Oh, California, you're great. You're California. You're from California. Oh, and one teacher said, "Oh, you're a male teacher." So now I'm representing male teachers now, and now I'm Japanese. First, I kind of felt a little bit overwhelmed, but then I thought that's nice. It's not many, maybe other finalists or gotten that. I mean, I felt like, wow, that's great. Now my job has just begun. By the way, many people think that I was the top, that was the end, that was the beginning. When they don't tell you what involves when you get an award. And but it's been an experience. With this one, I'm so grateful to be here and speak with you today. And that's my thought.
And how has Japanese language affected your students' lives? I know that some of your students are in the room today.
Yes. Do we have students? My students? 2 former students are here, and actually they are volunteering. They're volunteering,
yeah. And they'll have a chance to speak a little bit in the next session of the sharing when we do all of it. But what's your perspective?
It's always nice to hear from former students, like Facebook. That's the only time I've checked my Facebook. Someone posts something, "Sensei, how are you doing?" or "Genki desu ka?" whatever. Then nice to see that they're continuing studying Japanese, or they're trying to find a job in Japan, like this case, a JET program. I hope you get it. So that's the obvious one, but the not so obvious ones are there too. Those obvious ones that they're enrolled in Japanese, major in Japanese, but those people who did not major in Japanese, but they still, some make some connections with Japan. And I know that I'm not saying that all of them become fluent, but in Japanese, when they graduate from my class, not all of them, 100% of kids become fluent, or they get a job that has to do with Japan. But I know that every single kid becomes a global citizen of the world. So they have the awareness, the appreciation. So that I can say that. So
thank you so much. And we're going to move now to higher education, Dr. Midori McKeon Sensei. And you have a very long history of a very strong program at San Francisco State. So could you tell us a little bit about the program there?
Interestingly, the Japanese program at San Francisco State University started within the Chinese program. In the early 1960s, one Japanese class was created in the Chinese program. And at that time, Dr. Edith Yang, who is a bilingual of Chinese and Japanese languages, hired one Japanese teacher, Professor Mishima, who created the Japanese program in 15 years or so, BA program. And then within 30 years, in 1989, we created the master's program in Japanese. And within the CSU system, our master's program has contributed extensively in producing quality Japanese language teachers. And many of our students and former students are here. Please raise your hand. SFSU related. Thank you very much. We sent our graduates to Harvard, Stanford, UC Berkeley, University of San Francisco City College, and other community colleges, high school, elementary school, and even to the kindergarten Japanese classes. And also, we have sent our graduates to Thailand and Japanese universities as well. I'd like to mention that the Japanese program at San Francisco State University contributed to the broader learning of the Japanese language and promotion of Japanese language related research in the following way. First of all, we created an international conference on the practical linguistics of Japanese, in 1998, in cooperation of the collaboration with the Northern NCJT, Northern California Japanese Teachers Association. And we still hold this international conference every other year, where we bring cutting-edge researchers in linguistics and Japanese language educators together on the campus of San Francisco State University. And we also, in the early 2000s, we started hosting a JLPT, a Japanese language proficiency test. We administer as the site host, and we are one of the largest test sites in the United States. We have about 9 or so test sites, and we are the second largest test site in terms of number of students who take this test. For this presentation, I checked the number of students in the past 20 years. Interestingly, the Japanese major, the number of Japanese majors in 1992, that's 20 years ago, was 86, and now again 85. In 2007, the number of major increased to 155 and dropped to the 20 years ago, the level of 20 years ago. What I'd like to highlight here is that the number of Japanese minors increased drastically. 20 years ago, it was only four students who were minoring in Japanese. Now, the number increased to 26. That's almost 1/3 or 1/4 of the number of majors, Japanese majors. There's a task for us to nurture these minor students and not let them drop the study of Japanese languages, Japanese language in just 2 years. And somehow we would like to stimulate these group of students to continue studying after the graduation.
I want to thank you for the volunteers and the graduates that you are producing and helping to go out into the field of teaching. When I was teaching in San Francisco, I had a regular stream of volunteers from San Francisco State in my classroom, and probably out of about 15 of them, half of them ended up becoming teachers in the district. So it's just a wonderful pipeline that we have.
May I please speak a little bit on
Sure.
career possibilities? As you know, Japanese women do not produce as many children as before, and Japan is trying to accept foreign workers. And those who study Japanese will have a great possibilities, great career possibilities in Japan and at Japanese business here in California. and larger America. You may heard about this, but those who have studied second language will, on average, earn 30% higher salary. And those who studied Master Japanese would have an opportunity to work at the center of the Japanese business. In the center, by that word I mean to assist the top executives and work as in the field of translation and interpretation within the Japanese business. And in general, the translation jobs coming from Japan to America for professional interpreters and translators have decreased. But Japanese business are trying to hire somebody who are proficient in multi-languages or bilingual English and Japanese in the company, and try to use that as internal resources, and those people as internal resources. And I would like to say that those who studied translation at San Francisco State are working in the news section, the international news section, world news section of NHK and other businesses. And some of our students are earning 200,000 yen, 2 million yen per month as a translator. So the job opportunity is great. And as far as teaching jobs, we need to think globally. The local teaching opportunities may be currently constrained, but there is a system where you can register and apply for a teaching job, Japanese language teaching job worldwide. So please think globally. Thank you.
Wonderful. So you've essentially answered for us the theme of our conference, which is Japanese in the 21st century. What is it that our students can do with the language? Thank you so much for bringing us those direct quotes. I actually, can you give me your notes later? Because I want to use them in the school board meeting. So do you have any other advice for how you would like us to promote Japanese language education, or?
Yes, I have some very concrete dream.
Wonderful.
I wouldn't say request, suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
My child, who is now 27 years old, learned Japanese at Nomura School in the East Bay, and he was a reluctant Japanese language learner, but Nomura School sent him and two other students when they were second grader in the middle school to Japan, Japanese middle school, for 2 weeks in June. And my kid, who did not eat much food, expanded his repertoire in vegetables, edible vegetables, and came home with the skill of riding a bike. And since then, turned into a Japanese language enthusiastic student. So I would appreciate it if the Consulate General and Japan Foundation, and maybe with the cooperation of San Francisco School District, create a small child, middle schoolers, cultural ambassador system. And they go to Japanese middle schools as cultural ambassadors. And if we can do the opposite way too, if we can accept some Japanese second graders in the middle school into our school district middle school Japanese language classes, just for 2 weeks. I think that will open up their mind, and they will develop a friendship. And one friend of my son remains a close friend through the internet. And one of the cultural ambassadors sent to Japan just for 2 weeks became a professor of Japanese history.
Wow.
Hooked up in learning kanji, Chinese characters, and began to study kanji on his own. So the benefit will be infinite.
はい、わかりました。We have our assignment. We have to create this program. And let's do it quickly. My daughter's still in middle school, so maybe she can. Let's go. Let's all go to Japan. That's definitely one of my dreams too. So let's work together to make our dreams come true. Dreams come true. That's a very old Japanese song, right? Okay, I'm dating myself very badly. We're going to move into the next session. Before we do that, I wanted to ask if you have any questions for our esteemed panelists. Then I have a few people that I need to call on to offer some sharing with us. Any questions for our panelists? Yes, please. Thanks, Megumi.
Hi. I have a quick question while I have these people who are really leaders in our Japanese language education programs up on the panel. It's really, as you all brought to notice, it's definitely a critical time for Japanese language education with the decrease of funding and lack of support for the Japanese language education. As a community as a whole, I would like some guidance in terms of finding out, as a whole, what are your priorities? Because every school is competing for funding, supports, all of that. But really at a time as we're facing now, it's really important that the community come together as a whole and look at the whole and look at in which pieces can we, where the priorities should be to lend support and then to help one another, slowly achieve those objectives. And I was wondering, where do you start? Which programs, how do you define priorities for this big animal,
I have one idea, and it's from the 3 high schools that teach Japanese, Washington, Lincoln, and Lowell, and Margaret and I were talking about this. We really have to key in on the students that are taking Japanese at the lower levels and then prepare them to move into the high school levels and prepare the pathway that they can come through. And so the principal at Lincoln High School and I have talked about this and with Margaret and with Bill here, about developing a pathway for those students to come, as they come out of JBBP programs and come into the high school, that they can go ahead and take those higher level Japanese classes, and that we would have priority for them in those classes, or priority into the school, I should say, so that a 9th grader could be taking Japanese 5, 6, and on into the 10th grade as an AP class, and then have concurrent enrollment in whether it be City College or even SF State. Maybe we can make that connection here today for the 11th and 12th grade students, so that we would just keep the pathway funneled. I even talked to the Consulate General today about seeing if we could have some internship or even some volunteering with some of our students, so that we would keep this vital in the community. So.
I would just like to also add that it really is in a time, I think what you're saying is in declining fiscal environment, which is what the reality is. And how do I would challenge everyone to let's take a look at the whole child versus a program. We just came through an era in the United States where we were going through No Child Left Behind. And we put a very clear focus on 2 areas of a child's education. and we are paying the price for it now, I believe, in the country. And we need to a greater focus on what will be necessary for that child to be successful and a leader in the 21st century. And language acquisition, second language acquisition, it will be critical for that success. So we need to more go through almost a renaissance in education of looking at it versus looking at it just from the lens of English language arts and mathematics, which is what we did. We really have to see a renaissance in that process.
Yes. I think of 3 pillars: language pathway, articulation, and internship. And we'd like to send our students to USD, the school district schools, and that's mutually beneficial, I believe. And also, I would like to suggest that either school with the cooperation with the school district, maybe you already have this International Cultural Festival. One day, the entire campus would engage in the celebration of international cultural, different cultures, and families will be invited, and students will have opportunities to present dance, music, or whatever they have prepared at the festival. International, I don't mean just Japanese, and involving the all families and every student, as Bill mentioned, every student is a very precious student, and nobody should be left behind. To do that, each student should have the pride and what they already have as the cultural background, and that would be great. And in the 3rd week of November, we have International Education Week. This is National Department of Education's promotion of international education and international culture. That's the 3rd week of November. And if we could coordinate some kind of open campus or classroom visitation between the school district and high school, including the university, that might be a great impetus.
Wonderful idea. Thank you.
Families.
Thanks for all these great ideas. I'm trying to take some notes. If there's anybody out there taking notes, send them to me. I just want to make sure that we don't forget any of these great ideas that are coming out of today. Are there any other questions for the panelists? Okay, go ahead.
I know we have 2 Japanese bilingual bicultural programs in elementary school, and we have 3 strong programs in high school, but there is a big gap in middle school, and I think a lot of our families and staff are wondering what the district intends the middle school pathway program to look like at Presidio, and also what is the financial commitment?
Ericka gladly gives financial commitments off to me. I believe that as we look at the middle school pathway programs, not necessarily at one particular school over another one, we want to clearly articulate the fact that it's a quality middle school pathway program that we're offering in the district. And I do believe that that is going to take some financial support from the district. We also, in the climate, or the way the system is set up in San Francisco, we value that we allow a community to speak their values. So if the Japanese language and cultural program at a particular school is highly valued, then that community will speak loudly through their budget, because budget decisions, for those of you who don't know, in San Francisco, we are a site-based budget system where we give a block of funds to a school, and that school makes a decision with their school site council what programs they will have and funding within the limits. Of course, as Ericka has been very clear today, that we are in a dwindling fiscal climate. We really are. And I think that where the district can commit financially to a program, we will do so. And we are trying to do that every day. But we also have competing interests, and that's one of the things that when I talked about programs earlier, I think that when we have these competing interests, that we have to look at how could we deliver a better program, almost in a renaissance in education versus simply a single program. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but I am willing to engage in
and specifically for the language pathway for Rosa Parks and Clarendon going into Presidio, we will have a parent community meeting on February 23rd at Presidio to talk about all of these issues. So we welcome you to come to that. And we want our Hoover program to stay alive and well. And thanks to the Japan Society Adopt a School donation, we're going to be able to continue Japanese at Hoover. So we're very indebted and grateful to these partnerships that are making it possible for us. So are there, and I can definitely talk more to individual groups about individual issues when this is over. Sure.
I would just like to say this event today and the fact that we have many San Francisco Unified School District teachers and administrators here, and you see how much the Japanese Language and Cultural Program is of value to us. And I think that really speaks very loudly to where we will go in the future, because we are committed to that. And I do want to clearly communicate that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Sanderson. And there are a few people that we would like to hear from, in particular in the audience. So are there any burning questions for the panelists? Because you'll have more opportunities to talk as well. So Megumi Inoue, who's the representative from the Japan Society for the Adopt a School program, do you have any further things that you would like to add? First of all, thank you so much for the donation to our schools. We feel very, very fortunate.
Thank you so much. Like Margaret said, I am Megumi Inoue, and I am representing Japan Society of Northern California. And first of all, let me just extend thank you to the school district and the consulate for putting this program together. It is really important for the community of people interested in Japanese language to come together. So thank you. And one of the main initiatives for Japan Society of Northern California is to lend support to the continuation of Japanese language programs in the entire Bay Area. And our mission is to really determine what those needs are and to lend resource support to those areas. And I think, as mentioned, we did adopt a school in San Francisco to start off our pilot program. We did do what Dr. McKeon had mentioned about cultural resources. We used our support and our connections with our cultural ambassadors, such as in tea ceremony and ikebana in origami art, and brought them into the classroom and was able to really witness the value of your idea, which is to share these cultural traditions with the students and see them excited and engaged. And this is really where everything begins. So I think your idea is a very good one, and we've started it. And I look forward to working with all of you in determining some of those, as a community, the needs for Japanese language program continuation, and in what ways that, as Japan Society's mission, can be of support in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Megumi. Mr. Sekiguchi from the SPICE program of Stanford University.
Hi, my name is Rylan Sekiguchi, and I'm here. Maybe I should stand. I'm sorry. I'm here from the Stanford Program on International and Cross-Cultural Education, or SPICE for short, much easier to remember. And what we do is we help to develop curriculum units on all types of international and cross-cultural issues. We don't actually do very much on language in particular, but for those of you who have students who are interested in cultural aspects, historical aspects, other social aspects, We do have a couple of resources that I want to tell you about, or that I'd like to share with you today. The first is one of my colleagues, or one of the programs we run at Stanford University is called the Reischauer Scholars Program. It's of course named after Ambassador Reischauer. And what we do is every year we take high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors now, and we have them apply to this program. If they're accepted, they go through a distance learning class that goes from about January or February through about May or June. And it's all on Japan, so they watch lectures and they engage in online classrooms with Stanford scholars who are scholars on particular aspects of Japan, Japanese economy. We have some on pop culture as well, history, religions, and whatnot. If you have any students of yours that you think might be interested in a program, please come and talk to me, or maybe you can look at this brochure that is available, I believe, on that table over there. So that is one resource that we have at Stanford. And the other one is actually a kamishibai that we developed that tells the story of Sadako and the paper cranes. So I won't, of course, show you the whole thing, but for those of you, oh, thank you. I want to tell you about it because it's available free online if you would like and if you're interested, but it's basically just like a normal kamishibai with with illustrations on the front. It's a set of cards, and on the back it has what you would read to your students in telling the story. And it also has it in Japanese, so if you're a Japanese language teacher, perhaps this is a resource that you could use as well. And if you go, well, our website is spice.stanford.edu, and if you just search for kamishibai or for Sadako, it will come up. It's a free downloadable PDF that you can just print on double sides of your paper, or you can, if you'd like to, you can order the full large format copy. But those are two resources that we can offer you as well. We also have a teacher's guide that goes along with this. So if you are a Japanese language teacher, we have further resources for free on the same page. And if you teach high school or middle school or elementary school as well, we have lessons that are that incorporate the kamishibai as well. So those are two resources that I'm glad to share with you all today.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Sekiguchi. And we also have Timothy Lee from George Washington High School, a student of Mr. Morikawa Sensei.
Hi, my name is Smithy Lee. I am a student of Morikawa Sensei, 4 years. I'm currently in AP Japanese, and I'd like to just back Dr. McKeon about what she said about sending ambassadors to Japan. This past summer, I was involved in the JET Memorial Invitational Program. I had the chance and experience to go to Japan and experience all it had to offer. I was there for 9 days, and it really did change my life because Morikawa, without a doubt, does a wonderful job of teaching you Japanese cultural experiences and the language and linguistics, but learning it and being immersed in it are two totally different things. I was definitely just surrounded by culture and seeing new things that Mr. Morikawa hasn't touched up on, but it's definitely something that still lingers with me. I stay with the host family, and I'm still keeping in touch with them, still emailing them, and even along with that, keeping up with the people that that went on the trip with me. So it definitely created a community, and I feel like, me personally, I feel like somewhat of a bridge between me and my host family, just because I'm able to talk to these people that I met for only a day or two, but I'm still able to connect with them, still able to really share a friendship. And that's just something I wanted to testify.
Thank you so much, Timothy. Thank you. And we have a couple of parents that would like to hear from. First, we have Madoka Hokamura, a 5th grade parent from Clarendon.
Hi, my name is Madoka Hokamura. I'm a parent of Clarendon. Clarendon is one of the few public schools in this country that offer Japanese language and cultural education. The benefit of having this program, I'd like to explain from three aspects. One is for the non-Japanese students, and the other is for the Japanese students, and what it really means for Japan. For the non-Japanese students, I think many of you have already said, just teaching them Japanese language and culture opens them up to not only Japanese and Japanese culture, but beyond, to be more flexible and open to other cultures and languages. So I think that is the major benefit of this program. For the Japanese-speaking families, which I am one of them, I am Japanese, my husband is Japanese, we are trying to raise our kids fully bilingual. They are all at Saturday Hoshuko today. For the language aspect, often we get the question, how effective is it for a Japanese-speaking family? Because it is not an immersion program. It is mainly, the majority of the kids are, because it's a public school, are non-Japanese-speaking students. Going into Clarendon, I honestly did not expect much. I thought that, well, they'll get the cultural part, which is great. Japanese, I'll do it at home, I'll do it at Saturday school. I learned that it actually has a very big impact. I learned that every year when summer vacation starts, my kids, instead of going to Clarendon, go to full-day summer camp. And every year, by the third week, their Japanese starts to deteriorate very quickly. And I was wondering, why is it? They're not getting that much Japanese at Clarendon, but why is it? It's because when they're at Clarendon, they're exposed to Japanese, and they're forced to turn on their Japanese switch several times a day. It can be just simple phrases as being told, good morning, Mari-chan, ohayo. She has to answer ohayo, but when she does that, she turns on her Japanese switch. And for the kids, that clicking on that switch several times a day makes a big difference for that language development. I've seen it through all my 3 kids. It really works. So this program, although it is not an immersion program, really is helping raise bilingual kids. There's also the big positive part about identity. A few weeks ago, all the kids did a module about the Fred Korematsu Day. It really puts things into perspective. My kids are proud to be Japanese. To be able to speak Japanese is a cool thing at Clarendon, and I'm very, very fortunate to be able to offer this environment to my kids. So those are the 2 benefits for the Japanese-speaking families. And lastly, for Japan, this has a major impact because every single child that graduates from the JBVP program becomes ambassadors of Japan. Most of them will forget the Japanese they learned, but it's okay because they will remember the mochi they made, the kare raisu they had, the udon they ate, the origami they did, the bozumekuri they played. And when they grow up, when they hear about Japan, when working at a company, they will always be able to relate themselves to Japan. Japan is a small country. Its population is decreasing. So I think for the country, it's really important to increase the supporters that are non-Japanese. And every single child or person who has tried to learn a language, even if they stopped, if they have tried to learn the Japanese language, because language is the first step of the culture, they will always have a relationship with Japan and they will be our supporters. So I think it's a very positive and peaceful way of increasing our virtual population and virtual territory. So to continue to support these programs and to strengthen these programs, I really think has a major big impact for our country.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks, Madoka-san. And we'd like to hear from Rosa Parks, kindergarten parent, Midori Inari.
Hello, I'm Midori Inari, and I'm a parent of a kindergartner at the Rosa Parks JVP program, so we're new to the education of Japanese. Japanese, but very enthusiastic about it. I thought maybe I should give a little bit of background about myself and my husband and what motivated us to seek out foreign language programs for our son. So to begin with, both my husband and I are both Asian Americans, myself a third generation Japanese American, and my husband a second generation Chinese American. I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, my husband in New Jersey. And for both of us, we grew up in bilingual households. So my Nisei grandparents only spoke Japanese. My Nisei parents spoke both languages fluently. My husband's parents spoke broken English and Mandarin. So we both actually heard both languages, learned both cultures as infants and as young children. And then school started, and in my case, I went to kindergarten with another Japanese girl from Japan because her parents were stationed in New Orleans under the JETRO program. So that brought me some comfort that I had a childhood friend that could start school with me. And I actually used to get in trouble for speaking Japanese in kindergarten because I was supposed to be teaching my friend English. But my Nisei grandparents died. My Japanese friend went back to Japan, and I continued through the public school system as the only diversity in my entire school. So I subsequently lost my exposure to Japanese. As my brother and I went through school, we didn't have any peers that spoke Japanese. We sort of thought it was a stupid language. Why are we going to have anything to do with this culture? But then as we got older, I at least was able to study a little bit in college and found that it was actually pretty easy to pick up Japanese compared to any of the European languages because I had some foundation, though little, as a child. My husband went through the same sort of path. And of course, we moved to San Francisco and we found out, my goodness, the public school system has Japanese, not just Japanese, but many foreign language programs starting at the elementary school. How unique, how unusual. We've never heard of this anyplace else in the U.S. that either of us had ever lived. So when we learned about these programs, I think we literally were the first in line to sign our son up for the Rosa Parks Japanese bilingual program. We were told by the secretary actually that we were the first to register our son there. We haven't been disappointed. We've been thrilled with the teachers, the Japanese program, as well as the general education program. Unlike my husband and I, my son has friends who are going through the same thing. So it wasn't like we felt, as 7 and 8 year olds, that, wow, this is a stupid language. I'm hoping that my son will say, wow, all of my good buddies are learning Japanese and Japanese culture as well, and we continue to be motivated. I don't know where he's going to take this, but we hope that this will be a good foundation to give him choices in the future.
Thank you so much. We are running a little bit over where we thought we would be in the program, but I do want to hear from 2 more people before I turn the platform over to our Asian Art Museum host and to talk about the storytelling project. Dr. Fumiko Grant, where are you? Oh, here you are, right in front, sorry. Okay. President of the Northern California Japanese Teachers Association.
Hi, actually, honestly, I'm not prepared. I was ready for the other one, but can I say some?
Yes.
Yes. I've been teaching about 20 years, 25 years, or close to 30 years. And on and off, we had a conference, and we in the Bay Area, and we attended. And then today, I was so moved because this type of symposium, we haven't really had to share K-12, and so many people are here to listen what's going on these days. And myself, I was once in a president maybe 20 years ago, and then before I'm retiring, I thought I should dedicate myself to this world. So I became a president. And then I've seen all these people who are thinking about Japanese program, Japanese education to this degree. And I have not, as a president, I have not seen from this angle before. And now I am thinking, well, as a president, what can I do? I have to take another approach or some other approach. And I noticed that Northern California, not just NC, Northern California Japanese Teachers Association, which is our organization, but we have JAL and other associations as well. And I think those are mainly maybe high school, and our organization is unfortunately 90% are Japanese. And it's about time to communicate and combine, and then we have to move on, because for 21st century, I think the way we see should be somehow different. So it helped me a lot, and I really appreciate your insights, and I am encouraged. Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Also, I have to do Nemawa's thing. Unfortunately, the organization in some point is coming down, and we don't know why, and we have new members, and the committee members, actually a lot of committee members are here, and I'm so glad I'm start working Nemawa's thing to make voices. We have to have big organization, not by few people. So please, I think most of you are involved in the teaching field, and please make sure you are going to be a part of it, and then raise a voice, and we have to make a difference. That's what I felt from today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And lastly, we'd like to hear from Lucas, Yo Sensei, Azama Sensei's student. Tell us what you do and your plans.
Hello. Oh, hi everybody. I just want to thank Yo Azama for inviting me. I'm one of his students from high school at North Salinas High School. I was his student for 4 years. I started with the basic Japanese, learning the classroom rules, to AP Japanese, developing our own commercials for movies. And it was a lot of fun. And I just kind of wanted to reflect on one of the things that he said about learning foreign languages, and that you learn something else about yourself. And not just that, I found that through Japanese, I found that I had another self within me, and that wouldn't have come about had I not enrolled in Japanese. It's provided me a lot of opportunities to not only make friends, but also to make really important connections with people. A lot of really important people here that I've been able to meet. And I've been studying Japanese in college. I've continued it for the past 5 years. I've been there a few times, and I'm now an applicant for the JET program. So I'm hoping to go back and use my Japanese skills that started off in the high school classroom, to hopefully go and make a difference in terms of promoting diversity, but not in the United States, but to hopefully help people in Japan understand that there are other countries in the world, and hopefully help some of the students there, and people, not even just elementary, high school students, but grown individuals discover that there are other people living inside them that just need to be awakened. Thank you very much.
Lucas, what's your major?
Oh, I study astrophysics and Japanese language and literature.
Astrophysics
Yeah.
and Japanese language and literature. And where do you go to college?
I go to UC Berkeley, right across the bay.
Okay. Thank you so much. So wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing today. Thank all of you, and we will have to give up our panel and step down for the next presenter, but thank you so much, and let's definitely keep building these bridges and keep talking.